Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Cultist back with another logic video. Today we're going to talk about how to create finishers, or quick time events, whatever you want to call them. Kind of thing that they have in fighting games like Mortal Kombat and such. And we're going to talk about the basics real quick. You are going to need a method of damaging your foe so that upon death, the prompt to finish them triggers. So, label a puppet foe, or any one of these labels you want to damage. I generally use foe because it's pretty appropriate. I've also made him so he doesn't collide with the player, although you could make it so he does. When he's being grabbed, though, you will want to make him non-collidable, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But yes, essentially you want him labeled as foe, and if you go into controller logic, you'll find the health manager. I've hooked up to the current health output to a number displayer, and you can find number displayers up here in gadgets. There's one right there. I've hooked up the number/range. That's where I've added the wire to display his amount of HP, and if you press L1 and square, you can open up his health manager and customize it. First customize the current health, and then customize the maximum, because if you have the current health set too high, you won't be able to lower the maximum health. But I've set it to 5 so that we can easily damage him to the point of death, and that's pretty much all you need to know about the health manager, other than the fact that we deleted the wires that normally lead from no health to die, because we don't want him to die in the normal way. We've also got a currently losing health output going into him getting hurt. It's just an animation of him, getting hit real quick. I don't really think that's necessary, though, so just kind of thought I'd mention it real quick. The actual important thing is we have a chip called normal. Inside of it, I put a counter connected to a timeline called death, set to sustain. Inside that timeline, I've put another timeline because I want to be able to shut this off later, hence why the switch is connected to the bottom of it, and also why it's set to sustain. Now inside here we have this dizzy animation, which I used an action recorder to accomplish. Action recorders can be accessed from this animate tab. Here's one right here. I set it to keyframe mode, and I've got this little dizzy animation that can loop. I've got a separate tutorial on action recorders in case you're interested in how to animate with those. Then I've got this other one, which I copied the final frame of the previous action recorder and simply animated this extra falling routine, so if you don't finish him, he'll just fall down flat on his face. I've also added an action recorder with a single frame on it, and all it does is shut off his animations and his parameters, which the parameters are not super important. What I'm mainly thinking of is the procedural animations you'll want turned off. And since I have the switch that connects to them inside this chip, that's what I'm going for, is turning those off. And if you have any kind of behavior, like if he has AI or anything that tracks you, you'll want to shut that off with this keyframe as well, and set it to loop. I've also got a little text displayer which displays a prompt to finish him. In this case, it's going to be the triangle button. And I have connected a trigger zone set to detect a tag labeled can, meaning that you're allowed to perform the finisher during this phase, but no other phase. And it's set to cube. It's fairly wide. You do have to be close to him to perform the finishing move, though, so that's pretty much it for the normal chip. Now, inside the second chip is something that is more important. Basically, there's this tag called takedown, which I've put about here. Honestly, though, you might want to move it up a bit. L1 and square opens the tweak menu, so if you need to move it around, just grab it with R2. And it's connected to B, which will switch the state to this other chip, which has the counter already on inside of it. So as soon as this chip is active, this timeline is going to be playing out. And this timeline is actually also set to sustain, same as the other one. All it does, though, is shut off the parameters, and yeah, that's about it. It just shuts off the parameters and the animations. Now, the previous chip is going to automatically be shut off because the selector will be moved to the B input, so we don't have to worry about that. This switch will shut off, and all of his animations will be canceled. Now let's get into the player's logic and what we're going to need to perform a finisher. First off, we're going to have to put out a chip, which I have labeled takedown. And I have taken the triangle output from the controller sensor and connected it to a node. Rigged up to the bottom of that node is a little tag called can. It controls the power. I've directly connected it. If you want to access the power of a node, just press L1 and square and you'll see it down here. You can easily connect wires to it by just pressing X to connect them. And you'll notice that earlier we had the trigger zone called can, and this is what it's for. Basically, if you're within range, this little buddy will be active and he'll allow you to begin the prompt, but only during the duration where this trigger zone is active. And we've connected it to another node right here, and connected to that node's power is a NOT gate, and the node goes to a timeline set to play once. And inside here, actually, you know, you could set it to sustain, and that would work just as well. In fact, it probably would work better if you want to pause on the ending screen. But inside here is a switch connected to the NOT gate, which prevents playback. Although, if it's set to sustain, you may not actually need it that way. One thing you could do is for sustain, the playback method doesn't work so well, so maybe just put a switch. Like as soon as you're able to perform the finisher, this switch will be active. It's set to a target value of 1, so it will be instantly, you know, doing its thing. I've got some sound effects on here in time with the animations. They're not so important. I also have a camera shaker to add a little emphasis for when he gets hit and when he falls to the floor. Again, not so important to the whole logical course of action, but if you just want to add emphasis, here's a camera shaker in the gadgets. I also have this trigger zone at the very beginning, which is called takedown, and you may recall that we have this tag called takedown. So as soon as this is active, the NPC will be in the proper state to be tackled, as it were. I also have this little victory text displayer. It's pretty crude, it's just quickly slapped together, not very interesting. And I have this. It's a tag called grapple P, short for grapple point. And this is the point at which I'm going to intercept the other puppet. I have a teleporter on this puppet, also called grapple P, set to match target orientation. If you need to change the orientation, simply open this menu with L1 and square, and grab with R2 to change the points at which it intersects, you know, or interacts, I guess. I also moved it down to about the pelvis area so that we have a rough idea of where we want him to be. And yeah, once you have the proper position, then you can start animating. Now, I did something unusual with the animation in that I'm actually animating both puppets at the same time and simply scoping into them as needed. And I'm individually animating each frame. Of course, I had them together when I was animating this, so he wasn't doing this weird ghost slap across the room. Now, it is actually possible if you're like, well, what if I want the animations to be separately recorded? You know, what if I want the enemy's animation on his chip? You know, in case I want to copy these and reuse them with different characters or something. Well, you could just look at the board here, which you can access by pressing record mode, L1 and X, and then L1 and square, or I should say L1 and X again. Sorry about that. L1 and X again to open up the action recorder menu. And all you gotta do is, it's a little bit time consuming, figure out which of these connect to which puppet, and simply delete the ones that you don't want. Just take X and drag like so, and drop or whatever. Drag and select, and then just press triangle to delete the ones you want. And if you're able to track down, you know, the properly labeled parts of the other puppet, which I think you could, another way you could do it if you want to track down which goes, you know, to where, is if you go to the wires setting here, you'll see invisible connectors active, and basically if you scope in here, you'll be able to see directly where all of these wires go, and that'll make it a lot easier to separate. For instance, all these top ones go to this red fellow here. So you could delete all of that top stuff there. And it's a bit of a complex animation. I was initially going to use normal keyframes, not an action recorder, but it's more efficient to use an action recorder. And I feel like the animation is slightly smoother, but it is complex to line things up this way, like I have, you know, having them interact together. Very complex animation, may seem simplistic though. And it's set to sustain, which means at the end of this timeline, it'll just freeze on the final frame, which is him holding his hands up in the air. I've also got a series of cameras on the timeline. One starts from this position, and it is set to cut. Shuts off controller input, and it hides imps, and all of the cameras on here have that same setting. However, this one is slightly different in that it's set to smooth instead of cut as a transition type. And the transition time is 0.2. So it's going to zoom in real fast, get an angle of the punch, and I might as well just demonstrate it, so on and so on. See how it works out. First, we're going to have to damage him. Let's get in the right position. The controls are a little awkward for this. They could be better. And there you go. That's a finishing animation. And you could have it be more complex. You could also put a switch at the very end. You could have a trigger zone called end game, and set it to in scene, and all you gotta do is put a doorway somewhere. I've got this settings chip which hosts the camera and many of the world settings, but you could just put a doorway on here, connect a tag to it, and that trigger zone would trigger the tag, and we'll call it end game. Make sure it's capitalized properly, though. It is. And just in case, I would like to mention this. When you're performing this animation, the cameras seem to actually interrupt the base camera that's set up in the level. which is fine. But in case that doesn't happen, since it is somewhat random whether or not they will properly interrupt the other camera, you could feasibly have something that disables the camera. Either this keyframe disables it, or if you want to, make your assets more self-sufficient and easily copyable and reusable in any environment, you could just have something called hide turn off camera. It could also maybe double as something that hides the HUD. That's what I tend to do, is I'll shut off all the appropriate stuff with the hide HUD feature. Basically just call it hide HUD instead. And it would also shut off the player's, HP display and everything else. And we'll just call this hide HUD. And that would shut off the camera, or at least it wouldn't shut off the camera, it would turn it on. But if you either put a NOT gate in here, then it would shut it off. Or you could put a keyframe if you happen not to like NOT gates, and you'll just turn the power off. Which personally, I do tend to avoid NOT gates when I can. I don't know why, I just don't like them. They are useful though, so don't avoid them all the time. I think I just don't like the look of them. But anyway, I hope that was helpful in any endeavors you might be involved in, like if you're trying to make a game. This is actually a very old request, and we've only just now been able to get to it because we've been swamped with requests, but I hope it's finally paid off and we didn't take too long. Thanks for watching! Hopefully this was an insightful video or otherwise enjoyable. If it was, then go ahead and subscribe if you can, and hit the bell to keep up with our videos. Also, subscribed or not, give a like. If you have any questions or statements, leave a comment. We try to answer all comments. If you like what we do here and want to help out, consider becoming a channel member. Alternatively, you can check out the link in the description to support us through Patreon. Until next time, take it easy. That's all for now.